Bible and turn it up. If you remember, the beginning of the Gospel of Luke says, "This is for you, dear."
Awesome. Thank you.
So I'm going to let him tell you himself about himself, and let us learn about when we go by St. George's, what we can think more of. And I also want to reference Janine Fletcher, who some of you may have heard, who encouraged us to think of things in this frame. The more we know about each other's traditions, the more we know about God. And just think of Summit Avenue, 12 at least, manifestations of God along our avenue. So, let's listen.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. I'm getting the PowerPoint up soon, so I'll speak first, and then I'll get back to the PowerPoint. We'll show you some pictures. Again, thank you so much. For myself from the St. George community and Summit, thank you so much for inviting me and inviting us to speak with you all. Again, I echo Anne's points of coming together, of talking together, of sharing our faith together as one. It brings more love, it brings more unity. So I'm very grateful to be here today. I'm sad, actually. I had another colleague with me to speak. Her name was Dr. Ann Woods, and she got very sick last night. So she actually developed the PowerPoint in the lecture today. I'll speak for her. While she has, of course, a doctoral level background in theology, I'll tell you about me. I am going to be ordained a deacon in the Greek Orthodox Church, God willing, this coming year. So I have not the level of theological training as Dr. Ann has, but some, and I've serving the church, serving the Greek Orthodox Church has been part of my family's life since I was a little kid. So, and yeah, let me tell you more about me a little bit. My last name is Theophilos, Theophilos, lover of God, friend of God. In Greece, I have lineage in my family of priests of clergy. So a lot of times clergy in Greece would call their name, have it from the Bible, from the works of God. And my family line kept that when we moved to the United States of America. And my first name is Dean, but actually in Greece is Konstantinos, which comes from my patron saint, which is St. Constantine the Great. If anyone knows that saint, he was a Roman emperor who converted to Christianity. So I'm very happy of my last name, although sometimes they're like, that's a very long last name. Yes, it's hard on passports and driver's license cards. The hope really today, I want to give a brief overview of Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is an old faith. There's a lot of theology, a lot of history. We call ourselves the ancient faith because we can stem our lineage, our teachings, our community, our culture back to the apostles. But even with that vast amount of knowledge and data I could show you all, I just want to come and give some brief ideas and concepts of what Orthodoxy is all about. And frankly, in the United States, Orthodoxy isn't known a lot. Actually, it's sometimes more in the modern news. It's kind of a bad notion right now. I know with some of the current events right now, with the war going on in Ukraine. So hopefully sharing today, we'll just share the unique history of Orthodoxy, sometimes the weird history of Orthodoxy, but a way that we can come together and share our common faith, our common love in God and Christ and the mystery of God. So let me get this PowerPoint going. I apologize, we were scrambling at the end to get everything going because people were sick.
Yes, and I'm sorry I didn't mention, I did initially talk with Dr. Ann Woods, and we're very sorry that she couldn't make it, but she was very, very helpful in getting this fine person to come to us.
Yeah, let's do that, actually. Sorry, guys, it's just a little, how we could do this. Nope. So let's do a little bit of that. Yeah, I'm going to work, my technology is not working with me, so I'll just do the best I can. So, just again, a brief overview of history. I don't want to go too much into history. I want to just show a brief swath of the history of the Orthodox Church, because I think when we hear orthodoxy, the word itself, orthodoxia, doxa means praise in Greek, worship. Ortho means true, straight, genuine. So when you hear orthodoxy, sometimes the initial thing that goes to your mind is like we're the original church, the first church. But what does that actually mean? I would kind of spend a little bit of time explaining that to you all. So if you can see this in the best of your ability on the TV screen, Christianity in the early years was one. It was one full church. And the way that Orthodox would describe that unity back in the day was that in the founding area of Christianity, which is the Mediterranean, the world, the Roman Empire, Greece, Rome, Italy, they were major hubs, cities where Christians would be in. So a major city would be Jerusalem, or in Egypt, Alexandria, or Corinth, or Ephesus, where the epistles are written. So in the early days of Christianity, the first 100, 200 years after Christ, there were these hubs, these Christian communities that existed throughout the Mediterranean. And those communities grew and they got bigger and more people came together, and they wanted to make sure the communities were organized and structured. So we developed churches with local leadership. Those leaderships were bishops. Again, just as Christianity grew, these communities grew, they wanted to make sure that they had these figures, these leaders, these bishops to run their communities. So in the early days of Christianity, the big communities that came out was Rome, because Paul goes to Rome, helps convert there. There was Antioch, because during that time in the Middle East, Christianity was growing. Antioch had a home. Jerusalem, of course, that's where Christ did his ministry, where the resurrection, crucifixion occurred. There was communities there. Alexandria in Egypt was a big community. And then these communities, over time, what happens, if you know your history, Rome converts to Christianity. My patron St. Constantine is the first emperor who allows Christianity to exist. And then also, the city he moves to, Constantinople, Istanbul, becomes a major Christian hub. So again, early Christianity, these Christian communities, they have bishops, they have priests, and the Orthodox would say from those communities, that's where our faith comes from. It comes from those origins of those communities. And if you know history, time goes by, years, 100 years go by, 1,000 years go by, and there's an initial split. Oh, don't go on me now.
And they did not have to struggle with technology.
No, they did not. They had different types of technology, probably, but actually now it's actually working better. So there we go. Maybe this will bode better. There we go. No. There, oh. There we go. Okay. So again, the big thing you may hear about orthodoxy is, I'll just keep talking. The best of my ability. Sorry, everybody. Yeah, I'll keep talking, and somehow this will cooperate. But when people think of orthodoxy, the first thing that comes to mind is that, are you similar to Catholicism? Are you Catholics? And the next part of history is that in church history, there becomes this big schism in East and West. So you have all these church communities, some in the East, Antioch, Jerusalem, Alexandria, and Egypt, but the community in Rome there becomes a division between those two communities. And the Catholics would claim in their historical narrative that our community in the East, split from the Roman community, and we would say the reverse, that the Rome split from us. And again, I would love to, and I've been in conversations before, I would love to have ongoing historical conversations about that, but that's part of our history, is that what we see is these church communities that form, and they're trying to understand their theology and their faith and their culture. There becomes this split in history. So then Rome holds their church, with the Pope of Rome being their head leader, saying we're the true church, and the Orthodox say reverse, are several bishops. Because what happens in the Orthodox Church, unlike Catholicism, is that we have several head bishops. We have several patriarchs. So a big difference between Orthodoxy and Catholicism is that in Catholicism they would say the Pope of Rome is the head vicar of Christ, he's the head bishop. Orthodoxy would not. We have multiple bishops. We have multiple leaders in our faith. And those leaders are based in different geographical locations.
Maybe we could split with the technology.
Yes, and is that okay, guys? I apologize that somehow
You're doing a
yeah. So there's a split. There's again, so one thing Orthodoxy would be different than Catholicism is that we have several bishops. So maybe, I'm going to go personal, so maybe one time if you're driving around Minneapolis and St. Paul, you'll see St. George Greek Orthodox Church on Summit Avenue, or maybe you drive around Northwest Minneapolis and you see St. Mary's Russian Orthodox Church. Or maybe you go around St. Paul and see St. Mary's Romanian Orthodox Church. So that's a big difference. One thing about Orthodox is very unique is that when you maybe see Orthodox in the world, you'll see, well, why is there Greek? Why is there Russian? Why is there Serbian? Why is there Romanian, Bulgarian? Because in the Orthodox Church, unlike the Catholic Church, our leadership is spread through country jurisdictions. We have local bishops in different areas. So again, if we're all united in the same faith, but governally, administratively, we have bishops that run different cultural communities. So if you go to Serbia, there'll be a Serbian patriarch. That's our head bishop. If you go to Russia, there will be a head Russian bishop, patriarch in Moscow. The weird exceptions to this are with actually in the Greek Orthodox Church and actually in the Arab-speaking world. So in the Greek Orthodox Church, our head bishop is not in Greece, but in Istanbul, Constantinople. His name is Patriarch Bartholomew. Now, again, there's a long history to that. For a period of time, parts of Constantinople and Turkey was Greek, and they spoke Greek, but then after history and wars and the Turkey coming into being, that disconnect occurs. So because Orthodoxy has been around so long and so much history has occurred and so much wars and battles, we've had to change how we organize and govern our internal body, and frankly, sometimes it's very messy. I would say, as full sincerity, it's like Orthodoxy is a very, sometimes jurisdictionally messy church. We have a lot of sub-churches and small churches, yet we still, by God's grace, we still hold unity and community together. The other interesting piece, just thinking about what Orthodoxy is, you may see something called, actually one in St. Paul, called St. George Antiochian Orthodox Church. So that's the Arab-speaking world. Again, what happens in Orthodoxy, because we're an older faith, when Islam rises and occurs, a lot of Orthodox communities kind of get splintered when that happens. And there used to be a big, strong Arabic-speaking Orthodox community in Antioch, which is present-day Syria right now. And they have a head bishop and patriarch, but because there's been so much disconnect and splintering, most Arab-speaking Orthodox go to Antiochian parishes. So that's one of many jurisdictional churches to know. There's a piece of it of we would like to one day as an Orthodox faith come together in greater unity. I think that's the spirit of even coming here today and speaking. We want to keep moving towards just a greater jurisdictional unity, a Christian communal unity. But what's nice about having kind of separate jurisdictions that it kind of allows actually communities to still hold their cultural identity, because culture is important. One thing, the reality is that I do come to you as an Orthodox, but I come to you as a Greek, and that's important to me too. It's important to hold on to cultural traditions. So one thing that you'll see a lot about Orthodoxy is that Orthodoxy values culture. We really try to, whether any parish, Arab, Russian, Bulgarian, Ukrainian, we keep on our cultural lineage because culture has helped us understand our Christianity too. So that's a little bit about history and how Orthodox works. When you think about Orthodox, you think about history, you think about the lineage we have. The next thing you think about Orthodoxy that I think is very important, I wish I could show you more pictures, is our images. Actually, I love your church sanctuary. It's the stained glass is amazing and gorgeous. One thing that Orthodox values very much is the power, the deep, beautiful power that Christ gives us through art and imagery. And the big thing is icons. If you walk into a St. George's church, if you walk into any Orthodox church, you will see countless icons adorning the walls. It's very colorful. It lights the room. Now, there's a great long theological conversation about the power of icons. I know there's different disagreements upon that. If I would, of course, that could be a whole week or several years discussing that topic. But at least, so what are icons in the Orthodox Church? I wish I could show you one. Please come to our church, and we could definitely show you more of our icons in our sanctuary. But icons are the expression of the divine. And we're not, as Orthodox, we're not worshiping icons, we're venerating icons. Those two words, worshiping and venerating, are very unique words. But when you enter an Orthodox church, you're in the presence of God. We want to show that, what it means to be in the presence of God, and we do that through images. So there'll be images of Christ, of course, Christ's life, his death, his crucifixion, his burial, his resurrection, his ministry. We're a church of saints, so we'll have multiple saints on the walls, martyrs, kings, leaders, monks, monastics. We'll have images of angels, images of the Mother of God, Mary. And again, the theme of that is to enter you and embrace you into the presence of God, to get you into that encounter with Christ, into that encounter with God. Which I think is that's why I think as Orthodox, we so value the places of worship, to be in a place of worship. Just to be engaged here right now. I would even say, as I'm in this building with you now, this beautiful church building, we're already in the presence of God right now. Even by us engaging with our senses, we're engaging with God in a very intimate way. Orthodoxy values that very much. One thing about Orthodoxy, if you attend our church, we're ritual-based. So I'll tell a personal story. My wife wasn't raised Orthodox. She was raised evangelical, and I very much love that. I'm very glad my wife was raised evangelical, deep faith for God. And when our first dates together before she converted, she went to an Orthodox parish and I went to an evangelical parish. And it was great because, in more non-ritual based churches, there's more sermon speeches and talks. There's maybe more modern music. In Orthodoxy, it's the opposite. We have a lot of worship services. I believe in, I saw a little bit of your guys' service. There's more formal services here, formal rituals done at your parish. In Orthodoxy, it's very formal. It's very robust with vestments, ornate vestments, with beautiful colors. We have a certain type of chant called Byzantine chant, which if the computer was working, I'd show you that too. Our rituals are long, sometimes, and my wife can attest to it, sometimes archaic. We repeat. Our services can be, on average, at least an hour to 2 hours long, and during Holy Week or feast days, could be even longer. But again, it's different forms of worship. We believe that doing these more ornate, elongated rituals is a deeper expression of God's mystery, of our love for God. But it will be foreign to some. My wife, not being raised in Orthodoxy, she was like, this is a different language. It's like breathing a different air. And yet there's still a beauty and mystery to all different Christian expressions, ways of worship. But again, we go back to the power of symbols, the power of images, of art. We really believe that engaging in art, engaging in symbols and music, engaging all of our senses and our bodies, we get closer to Christ. One thing unique in an Orthodox church, although you don't see this so much in American churches, is that we have no pews. A lot of Orthodox churches, if you go to Greece or Russia or Serbia, they're pewless. There may be some seats on the sides of the walls. And the idea is that it's kind of engaged in the whole body. In Orthodoxy, you'll see Orthodox sands sit, do their cross, do a full metania, which is a full bowing down to the church. Again, this idea of we want to really engage the body when we enter into an Orthodox sanctuary. You'll see us kiss icons. A very common thing. The first thing you walk into St. George, you'll see these beautiful icons right before you enter into the nave of the church. And you see parishioners kiss them. Again, there's that bodily interaction, that bodily engagement with the divine, with God. Language-wise, our church speaks some Greek, so when you go into church, you'll hear a little bit of Greek and English. It's the same thing if you go to a Russian Orthodox church or Romanian Orthodox church. And of course, that's going back to the value of honoring our culture where we came from. We want to know the lineage of that. And of course, in the Greek Orthodox tradition, we take a lot of pride in our language, as it was the language the Gospels were written in. So much of rich Christian theology comes from the Greek language. And again, I think what's beautiful about Orthodoxy, when we try to do, is that we really honor the diversity of language. It's a powerful thing to know that if you go to an Orthodox church and you hear a language in Greek, in Ukrainian, in Serbian, they're all saying the same words in their praise to God and praise to Christ. Another thing with the Orthodox Church, when you walk into parishes, we have, I'll give an example. Like if you walk into this beautiful church, you see the altar in front of you. In an Orthodox church, that actually is not seen. The altar is not seen. We have something called the iconostas, which is this big wall. If you could picture it almost if this was at your parish, there'd just be this big wall with doors leading into where the altar is. And sometimes people are kind of like, well, why is that? It seems like people are going in and out on stage. Why are they hiding at times? Because Orthodoxy values art and ritual and beauty so important, we really hold the sanctity and the power and the mystery of God. We desire to keep the mystery of that protected and hidden at times. We want to uphold the mystery. The iconostas is kind of showing that the Holy of Holies, where the Eucharist is, where God is, needs to be kept safe. At times hidden, not for reasons of exclusion, but reasons for holding its mystery. We would claim our worship style stems back from the Old Testament. Of course, it's a long theological conversation of how Orthodoxy can trace their worship back to the Old Testament, to the temple in Jerusalem, to the Holy of Holies. But there's this theme of, we want to keep the pure mystery, which is the Eucharist, protected, showing its power, showing that it will be given to the people, showing that God's love is there, but that it's in a very sacred, special place. So most Orthodox churches, you'll feel like, I can't see everybody back there because of that iconostas. Again, we're a sacramental church, so we celebrate communion every Sunday. We believe in the common 7 sacraments, although Orthodoxy doesn't believe just in 7 sacraments. We believe there's actually multiple beliefs that there's multiple sacraments more than just 7. But we are a Eucharist church, so if you go there, we do Eucharist every Sunday for our divine liturgy. We call it divine liturgy. Our Eucharist is only for Orthodox. It's closed communion. It's only for Orthodox Christians. I know that's sometimes, a debatable reaction when people see that. Well, why can't everyone take communion? Aren't we all Christians together? And the response to that would be, the love of God is still present and still affects everyone, all the time. The act isn't so much exclusionary, but the idea of we have a certain way of worshiping. We really value that you enter into a unique way of worshiping when you enter an Orthodox church. So if you've been baptized and lived your life in the faith, that gives you that type of interaction is important for our development as Christians. And again, us having communion is no guarantee. I'll discuss briefly on this. It doesn't mean that we're better or we have salvation better or that we're better Christians because we have close communion. It's just our unique way of worship, our unique way of expressing the way we engage with God involves that we take the Eucharist in a special manner. So one thing that I'm a big advocate of, and the people I've had in my life, is that Orthodoxy, although we're an older faith, we're sometimes a much more stricter faith, we don't think ourselves of this, oh, we're the stronger, better, more intense Christians because we're doing these things. Far from it. Receiving Holy Communion is a reminder of me that I'm still at the mercy of God, that I'm struggling with fear and trembling to get closer to Him, but because of my love for Him, my care for Him, I want to enter that relationship with Him. And the hope, there's so much of the Orthodox faith, and I think it's very similar to, I would say there are parallels to the Catholicism in the context of that, like we try to take our church practices very seriously. We want to go, during Lent, we just finished Lent for us. There's a lot of services throughout the week, throughout the month, the 40 days leading up to Holy Week. We want to go to those services. We want to engage in those different liturgical practices. If you go to an Orthodox prayer book, you'll see these many, many prayers, very long prayers, repeating prayers. Orthodox love to do prayers in threes. You'll see a prayer will repeat everything 3 times. Again, that rigor, it's not just because we want to punish ourselves because it'd be so intense, but we want that level of deepening our faith with God and understanding the word struggle, what it means to wrestle with God. The word asceticism, is this Greek word of work, of doing that extra work. And in Orthodoxy, that means engaging in these elongated rituals, in these rituals that pull you, that move you to reach closer to God, to more intense to God. The other piece of this is, and what you'll see in the Orthodox faith, I'll kind of hit some larger points, is that we value the Mother of God, Mary, the Virgin Mary. In Greek, we call her the Theotokos, which means the bearer of God. Theo is God, tokos in Greek is bearer, the holder of God. And again, that's very similar when you think about Mary. That's very similar to Catholicism, the Catholic faith. Again, I think there's a lot of parallels to how Catholics and Orthodox view Mary. We view her as a central figure in understanding our faith, understanding God, because she bore God, she gave birth to God, she gave birth to Christ. Where we differ from Catholicism, on a brief theological note, is that we don't, Catholicism may make her kind of even more, how to say this without getting too theologically wordy, more like fully perfect, so for example, the Immaculate Conception, or when the Virgin Mary dies, they believe that she died, she went straight to heaven, she was fully perfect. Orthodoxy believes that she's perfect, but she wasn't extra distinct. So we still honor her humanness, but we also honor her holiness. That being said, I'm trying to explain that theological concept. You do see a lot of honoring of Mary. There'll be a lot of honoring Mary in our church. We'll do a lot of prayers to her. We'll honor for her prayers, for her intercessions in our lives. And again, right now I'm just kind of, as I know the PowerPoint, I'm just going to tell you more kind of facts about the Orthodox Church. We have saints. We believe that saints engage with us. We believe that saints are around us, that saints interact in our lives. When we pray to saints, we're not asking that the saint particularly does the thing to our life to change our life. We don't believe the saint has the power, but we believe that they're with us. We believe that, even if you were to ask me, pray for me this weekend, I got a big medical appointment coming up, or pray to me, I have a big test. Not because I think that I, Dean, can help make you get the test or have good health, but that in love and communion, we can all live together as one in Christian faith. We believe that for the saints too. So if I go back to my home, I have my patron saint, St. Constantine the Great. I may pray to him. I'm not asking, St. Constantine, make me, give me more money. I'm just asking, hey, I love you. You're part of my Christian family, although you've passed. Be part of my life right now. So praying, again, I would love, again, there could be months and weeks about this conversation, what it means to pray and interact or venerate a saint. We want to engage with those who have passed. We believe that, again, Christ ended death. He conquered death. And with that, the saints are alive. I even hold a space right now in the beautiful stained glass windows. Those saints, those prophets, those martyrs on the walls, they're with us right now. So when you walk into an Orthodox church, you believe that the saints are with you. There's a famous story that a convert came to Orthodoxy, and it was a quiet church. It was very dark, and no one was there. And there was one priest doing the service. But the person said they swear they saw hundreds of people in the church. And afterwards, they go to the priest, and why is that true? I thought I saw hundreds of people there. He's like, well, those are the icons. Those were the images. Those are people who are still alive in the faith with us right now. Again, other pieces. Yeah, we have. Again, we're a liturgical church, so we have bishops. So our head bishops are called patriarchs. Followed by that, we have archbishops. We have bishops. For example, there's our bishop is in Chicago. He's called a metropolitan. Metropolitans just run certain areas of the United States. Our clergy ranks. I'm be ordained a deacon. There's priests. There's archpriests, which just means an older level of priests. We have a rich monastic community. Another thing about Orthodoxy, if you get to know the faith, we have many monasteries. Maybe you saw in the images, there's famous monasteries in Greece called Mount Athos. These mountains tucked away in the mountains in the hills of Greece. That's where monks live their entire lives. They're all male monasteries. There's monasteries in Greece up on mountains. So there's these famous monasteries in Greece where it's just these mountaintops. There's a single mountaintop at the top is a little monastery. Other famous monasteries, one on Mount Sinai where Moses received the Ten Commandments. That's the monastery of St. Catherine. It's an Orthodox monastery. And of course, there's a famous monasteries in Russia and Ukraine, the Kiev Lavra, which is the famous monastery in Kiev, which is a center of Slavic Orthodoxy. So we're a big believer in having monastic community because, again, it helps us understand what it means to engage in Orthodox lifestyle and Orthodox worship. Other things you may notice in Orthodoxy, we wear black a lot. We have a lot of black robes, very similar to Catholics, but one thing you may notice in Orthodoxy, we have these hats. We have these very tall hats. There's different names for them. I forget the exact name for in Greek, how it translates. Actually, that comes from actually a history of kind of persecution. When the Byzantine Empire ended, when the Ottoman Empire, remember if you know your history, Turkey was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire took over Greece and the Middle East. Those hats signify that you were a part of the government. So when the Ottoman Empire took over Greece and took over parts of the Middle East, they needed judges, impartial judges. So what they would do is that they actually would hire people of different faith backgrounds, whether Christian or Jewish, to be part of their legal system. So those hats have more of their origin in the fact that we've been under control of another nation, another persecution for many years. And actually, that'd be my next piece of what Orthodoxy is. Orthodoxy is a faith that's been persecuted. So going back to history for a little bit, Orthodoxy, again, the Byzantine Empire existed. So that was a big split. You had the East saying we're different from Rome, we're different from the East. One of the reasons is because the East had the Byzantine Empire, all these great leaders, these Roman leaders. But then in 1453, the Ottoman Empire came in, and all those Orthodox nations were controlled now by another nation. And so for a long part of Orthodoxy's time, Orthodoxy was under control of a foreign nation, a nation that was somewhat hostile, at times very hostile to Christianity. And actually, frankly, that's one of the reasons why maybe when you meet Orthodox, they can be a little bit more scared or apprehensive, because so much of our faith has been kind of feeling like we've been ostracized throughout our lives. I would say, from my own personal story, my great-grandparents came here from Greece back in the turn of the century. And the reason they came from Greece is because Greece was poor. Greece had their independence, but because of 100, 500 years of Ottoman rule, of Turkish rule, Greece was decimated economically. So many Greeks come over here, and that's true for Bulgarians, to Serbians, to Romanians. They come to the United States because they had so very little. And that's sometimes, I would say, because my wife can attest to it too. Sometimes you go to an Orthodox parish, it's a little more like, oh, this seems kind of a little tight-knit. No one's very friendly here. It's because a lot of these communities have struggled with having no community at all and having to deal with those struggles. And if you speak for the Russian existence and Ukrainian existence, well, for the past 20th century, there was a Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union persecuted and stomped out Christianity. So Russia, which I can gladly talk about, I mean, as you guys know in the news, Russia's a big part of the news right now. Russia has experienced a lot of tumultuous in and out history of their faith because they've had to deal with the past, for most of the 20th century, have a nation that wasn't allowing faith at all, that wasn't allowing Christian dialogue. Yes?
Dean, I don't want to, this is fascinating.
Yes.
But would you like to take a few questions or keep going?
No, please. And thank you guys for listening. I know I'm just kind of, I'm just speaking outside the PowerPoint, riffing right now with you all, so thank you for that. But one of the questions, and so my last point would be, with our rich history, I would love to impart with you all today is just the value of the beauty of worship and how the worship can affect your whole body, mind, and soul. Like truly, when I entered in this sacred space with you all right now, and I saw the stained glass windows, and I saw the high ceiling, that for me is a spiritual experience, and I can see the presence of God in this community. And one of the things I think is beautiful, and Ann and I were talking about this beforehand, is creating more Christian unity, is how we worship is such a beautiful way to understand God and become closer to God, and how worship is simply entering into a building and experiencing worship in that level, that holistic level of worship. So with that, yeah, please, thank you again.
I love that because many of us are wedded to our sanctuary for the same reasons, but we have the elevation of the word that I think that's really interesting to see, that we are we're a reading verbal, it's a different approach.
Yeah.
So the unity and diversity is fascinating.
Yeah.
So please.
Yes, so thank you guys, yes. We'll start from the front, yes, yeah.
About 20 years ago or so, there was a pilgrimage group from
Yes.
this church, and we wound up in Istanbul with a Protestant minister who had been a missionary in that area for 15 or 20 years, now retired. And he took us over to the Metropolitan's Church in Istanbul.
Yeah.
And we were struck by the internal beauty of the icons
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. But one of the things that was striking was we were told there were priests who were praying there, and we were told that they prayed 24 hours a day.
Amen.
There was at least one or two constantly praying in that space. And that was just something that was unusual and
Yeah.
a wake up
Yeah.
as far as we're concerned.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll echo that. Like, I don't know your name. Kent was telling a story that he went to Istanbul, Turkey, and went to this church, this metropolitan church, and heard stories of priests praying 24 hours a day, praying constantly. And that's actually a very common thing in Orthodoxy. We believe in constant prayer and continual prayer. As St. Paul writes, pray without ceasing. So that's a big ritual way of living a Christian life, is that continual prayer. So thank you. We'll go down. How about yeah?
Are you a confessional church in terms of community confession, or is it like the Catholic Church where you go to confession?
Yes, similar to more Catholics, our sacrament of confession is individual. So you go to confession. But Orthodoxy recognizes too that throughout Christian history that wasn't always the case, that there was times where confession was communal. But we align more with the Catholic Church in it being individual. Let's go over it. Oh, let's do them.
I'm a Freemason, and a Jewish brother died some years ago, and he's a member of Temple of Aaron.
Yeah,
And so we went to the service, and then we went to the burial service.
yeah,
Okay, you put 3 scoops of dirt on the casket.
yeah,
And according to the rabbi, in our tradition, 3 is the number of intentionality.
yeah.
1 is circumstantial, 2 is accidental, 3 is intentional.
Yeah.
Is that where the Greek Orthodox gets their 3 prayers?
Yes, I mean, the reality of 3. I mean, I know it sounds weird. The power of 3 is so pivotal in spirituality on a deeper, like, universal level. And so, the repeating of the simple answer would be that repeating is honoring the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. However, I have seen commentary of it showing the levels of meaning of the triune nature of repeating prayers, like similar to what you experienced at the funeral service. So yes, we'll do the mic passing. So
Thank you very much
Yes.
for your presentation.
of course,
Talking about ascesis, and I was raised by a Greek Orthodox
Oh,
mother.
beautiful.
I think mentioning fasting is very important. You need to fast before you take communion. I have friends just now who have fasted for 40 days during Lent. So fasting is a major practice. And I would like to ask a question.
Yes.
As far as I know, Orthodox Greek Church, at least as I have
Sure.
experienced it, is very male-dominated. Do you have within the church at large discussions about gender?
Yes, of course. No, thank you for that. So the question's about gender. The initial first answer is that yes, our clergy are males. We to be a priest, to be a bishop, you have to be a male. However, Orthodoxy is in ongoing conversations to talk about. There's a little more variations of that. If you look at the ancient Christian church, there was a rich history of female deaconesses, of deacons serving in the church. And actually, if you go to certain female monasteries, certain female monks and monastics do help participate in the liturgy, in the services. Again, I would hold this piece of it is that we, as Orthodox, we hold ancient traditions that may at times feel, to use these labels of conservative or liberal, more conservative in nature. Yet I think Orthodoxy tries to have still ongoing dialogues and conversations about the variations of that. So even this conversation of women, although Orthodoxy knows that the priests are males, they want to try to talk about, no, we have a rich history of females serving the church. How do we bring that back? Because as Orthodoxy realizes, we can claim we're old and ancient, but if you look at the history, there's a lot more variation to that. There's a famous saint called Saint Phoebe, and she was a very profound deaconess that helped shape the early church. So there's actually, to understand the layers of Christian history to help us understand gender more and women's roles in the church. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Relationship currently between the Ukrainian church and the Russian church. How are they interacting, or are they?
Yeah. So this one's probably the most. This is and I don't mind talking about this. I'll share a little personally. So my father was chief legal counsel for the Greek Orthodox Church. So when I was a young kid, I was involved in the church, but I was also involved in all the wonderful scandals that the church had to offer. So my father was never shy to be, Dean, you got to learn how to talk about these things. So I'll try to keep this short and brief. The division right now is about leadership. The Russian Orthodox Church says that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is not legitimate, that its leadership was invalid because our patriarch, Constantinople, gave it its jurisdictional power. In Constantinople, our church would say, no, we have reason, just cause for us to have that church. Sadly, but also it's part of reality. This is not foreign to Orthodoxy. Less than 100 years ago, over the 20th century, we had several schisms. actually occurring in Russia still because of the Soviet Union's control over Russia. This is my hopeful statement, is that this will be resolved, that I think that Orthodoxy is going to try to come together with all its churches, whether in Ukraine, Serbia, Romania, Georgia, Bulgaria, to have a communal discussion. But it's hard right now. It's hard when I think what's made things worse about fleshing out this theological conversation when there's an active war going on, when there's an active internal fighting. However, I tell that to you, but that was going on during during the time of the Soviet Union. I mean, a lot of Orthodox think this is a new thing. It really isn't. We've had times where there's been this geopolitical turmoil going on, and the church is trying to flesh this out. But it doesn't, and frankly, it doesn't actually mean that Orthodox here in Minnesota don't work together. We have 2 Russian Orthodox parishes here in the Twin Cities. We still talk to them, spend time with them, connect with them, do ministry together. So we know there's sadness and sorrow, but we're still working together. And even knowing that I've seen here in Twin Cities and the United States, but here in the Twin Cities, Ukrainian and Russian Orthodox still coming together, even though this is going on. But yes, this is a jurisdictional issue that's occurring. There is a formal schism, but hopefully there'll be ways to figure it out. So thank you.
Got one more question.
You can always ask questions later too. Yeah.
You canceled?
One more
Oh, you answered it. Okay. Anybody else? We got one more. Wait. This lady right here is first.
Thank you. I sense your passion, and I wonder, is this common throughout your congregation? But my main wondering is the younger generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a great question. I'm probably an outlier. My wife would probably definitely agree with that, just because I was raised around people who really try to take my faith seriously. It's a good question. Maybe I'll end with this, and please, I'll be around afterwards to ask more. I thank you guys just for listening to me to talk and without a PowerPoint. But here's one way I would describe, there's kind of 2 things you maybe notice in Orthodoxy that are kind of unique. One, when you engage in other cultures, sometimes people go to faith not because they know the faith, but because of their culture identity. And that's a reality. Like, I don't care what any faith background you are. Like, like, we could go to Italy right now and meet Italians who go to their Catholic church, but they just say, well, I go to Catholic church because I'm Italian. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, if we went to Germany and we went to a small little Bavarian town and they've been going to this Bavarian church for 500 years. Well, that's their faith. We wouldn't say, well, you're not faithful. Now, that being said, that's one thing about Orthodoxy. When you meet Orthodox Christians, especially from the ethnic background, they'll be like, well, I'm Orthodox because I'm Greek. I'm Orthodox because I'm Arabic. Or I'm Orthodox because I'm Russian. Like, that phenomenon, that reality, I think Orthodoxy is trying to understand in America. Because the reality is that although I'm Greek or my friend's Arabic, my friend's Russian, we're all American. And how do we exist in that? And a big thing that the Greek church is trying to work in right now is to realize, well, how do you honor your culture, but also realize you're something more? First off, we're all Americans, we come together, we're all Christians. That I know that I'm so grateful that my great-grandparents went to church hundreds of years ago, but yet I still want to know what it means to go to church today in 2023. So we really try to, in our youth, to really show that, like, you can still honor your cultural background, because we all have a history. You know, my wife's Canadian and has her origins back in Scotland and England. That's her cultural background. But how do you honor that culture and still be in the faith in 2023? The Greek Orthodox Church is trying to honor that. The other reality, and I don't know, I saw a recent Pew Research poll, Orthodoxy is growing among converts. There's there's been a growth of converts who weren't Orthodox coming to Orthodoxy. That has actually been both good and problematic, because I remember I was talking to Ann before this, and I'll say this, how to say this kindly. We are an ancient church. We are not a reactionary aggressive church. That's a very hard thing sometimes. I love ancient things, as I could talk to you more about that. I could bore you even more or make you happy and tell you how much I love ancient things. But I don't believe in ancient things because I just want everything to be reactionary and just be a reactionary, angry, conservative person. I love ancient things because I know it has value in many levels. However, coming to the Orthodox Church, there is sometimes a struggle to be like, well, this is all old and ancient, and I like old things, and everything's got to be old and conservative and reactionary. It's like, oh no, we can still be old and love the beauty of old, but know that we can still be loving and Christians and caring. Those are not separate things. So to answer your question, I think for the new generations, we want to honor, on the one hand, honor our culture, honor our lineage. I love my history, my background of being Greek. Love that it's ancient. I love the ancient word. I love the ancient liturgy. I love the Greek language. I love the history, the lineage. I want that robust feeling of knowing that ancient lineage. And I got to be loving, because that idea of the power of Christ's love, the power of Christ's love that trampled death, that destroyed the bonds of Hades, that destroyed our struggles, that love that permeates everyone we know, our brother and sister. To hold that reality, I think the Orthodox Church is trying to work on. And I think every Christian church is trying to do too. I think particularly Orthodoxy. So that's my response. It's a great question. Again, yeah.
I thank you so much for your passion and the insights that we could only get through a real person into Greek Orthodoxy. And also, I think in our greater context, as being part of the great American experiment of unity in diversity. So I'm so glad to meet our neighbor face to face.
Thank you.
And loving our neighbor.
Yes. Thank you, Ann. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I can't urge you enough to go into that sanctuary. The emphasis on the experiential and the sensual is just amazing.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, kids.